I said 25 years, it sounds really short in my head, but in other people's head it might actually sound a bit long. So we'll see how that goes. So Dan gave a fairly open gamut to what I could actually cover in this presentation. So this is, I think, the fourth iteration of the presentation that I've put together. So I hope it sort of gets to the point, which is basically my whole entire career has been about changing hats and different jobs. So I've actually had to do different things I just didn't think I would actually do when I started out in my study. So just a few things, flavour. All right, so who am I? Many names. Some call me Bundo, others Undies. I get B-Dog every now and then, and my wife calls me a few names that I can't really mention right now. Married with kids, 3 great kids, and I've got a little kitty cat named Aiko. I've seen him, beautiful cat. Ash, perfect. I love cars, so a petrol-powered computer works for me. And I'm part of a brilliant team at 7 West Media at the moment, which is where I am now. And what I just want to take you through is just my career progression and all the different hats I've sort of had to adopt. I studied at TAFE, did a media design course. I think we were the second class to go through, and it was a great course. We covered all the basics. We did typography, we did colour theory, we did composition, art history, all of the basics, design 101, something that probably doesn't get covered a lot in some of the web design and multimedia courses these days, which is a shame. I actually didn't finish about a third of the way through my second year, but oh, that's close. I actually got offered a job doing what I was studying, so I sort of weighed up the two things. The course was going a bit slow, so I thought, well, might as well jump in with both feet, and managed to get a job with Interactive Logic, actually working on selling the R&I Bank Tower in Perth to a Japanese conglomerate. So we were doing an interactive multimedia sales tool for that. And that's where I started learning lots and wearing lots of hats and collecting them metaphorically. Began the love of user experience back then. It was called instructional design back then, teaching people, letting people learn properly, which is kind of boring when it was really UX. So just to give you a picture, back then, interactive multimedia, text, sound, animation, video, graphics, all combined together in a 256 colour palette. Hugely difficult back then. We used to scan these beautiful Cedrochrome photographic prints in and then convert them down to 256 colours just so that we could display them on the screen. This was similar to, I probably had an Apple sticker on my Mac 2CI as well, a 640 by 480 screen, which is smaller than most phones these days. And I started developing in a program called Authorware. It was this really easy to learn programming language that you drag icons from this palette over onto a timeline, and it allowed people to set up interactions with buttons and dragging things into different areas, and allowed you to create courseware or courses for people learning. And it was all delivered on the shiny disk on the right-hand side of the screen there. They were $25 a pop and took an hour to burn, which was amazing. It was really frustrating. We had a CD burner back then, which was gay high and that thick, and had a hard disk inside it, and we could plug different CD-ROM drives into it and we'll analyse the characteristics of the CD-ROM drive, so we had them sort of profiled to a certain extent. And we can put our courseware onto that hard drive and then play it back and make sure it was all working right. The reason why you had to do that, you had to move files around on the disk so that the bit of courseware software that you were working in at the same time, if there was any video or big graphics being referenced, it had to be right next to it on the disk, because we're talking 150 millisecond or 150 bit per second machines. And that's really slow. It will take approximately 3 seconds for it to scan the disk from the inside where your playing with the software to the outside where you might have left the file. So it was really hard to work with, but it was really interesting at the same time. Some of the first digital video we did here in Perth, it was done on a Betacam, really high quality video camera. We had large Betacam SP players. I think I had approximately $350,000 worth of equipment in my $600 DATS and $1,600 transfer just the equipment so we could do that encoding. Sorry I don't have any designs from this early. This was 1990 to 95. So if there's a tip I'll give to any young designers here, keep your old work because it's really great to go back and reflect on what you did. So keep it safe. Don't lose the hard disks, or at least put it somewhere or transfer it to the new disks as new technology comes around. Then came the web in 95. Someone gave me a magazine, I can't even remember who, but it was a .NET magazine. It wasn't this issue, I think this is issue 3. I think it was issue 1 or 2, and it talked all about the internet. And this was completely brand new. Doing interactive multimedia, you're delivering up on a CD-ROM, you can't have internet, you can't have a network connection between what you're doing and another person or anything like that. So when this came along, it was like, holy fuck, what can I do with this? It was an absolute game changer, and as it happened, the company that I was working with in that year closed. Luckily, about a week later, I managed to get a job with a company called BRENDAN. Now, after a few months, this was the first main website that I designed for Westdol's Web. It was it was meant to be like a business and social directory for Western Australia, and we went out with sandwich boards on Oxford Street trying to get businesses to come in and actually buy in and create a listing. You know, like they used to go to the paper and buy a listing in the paper for $25. They could get their name, 4 lines of text, and their logo on this. Pretty rudimentary, but back then, today, tonight was saying the internet was a fad, so it was a big thing. I learned HTML. There wasn't massive amounts of information out there about how to learn HTML. So generally, I think I took a 2-hour course somewhere, and then everything else was learned on the fly. You look up other people's websites to see how they're doing it. You have a look at other people's designs with that, and you evolve from there. And we used to use lots and lots of tables in our development. There was nothing special like cascading style sheets or JavaScript or anything like that back then. We now laugh at how we used to code back then compared to what we do now. Westdol's Web actually was a company, but we actually had a lot of other companies coming to us. Can you build us our website? Who knew? There wasn't actually many digital agencies out there, so we created our digital. It was one of the biggest digital agencies in Perth for about 5 to 6 years, from about 96 through 2001. This was another website that I designed. It actually won, as you can see there, an Australian Internet Award. I think it was sponsored by Telstra back then in 1996. And yeah, they're all the icons that I designed. Pretty twee, if you may ask, but it won an award and people used it, and it got, there's actually another, a couple of years later, if you looked at the number of awards that were won with that site, it was pretty amazing. And the client was really happy with it. We continue to learn. Web design was in its absolute infancy. We're talking, what, 2 to 3 years after the internet, the World Wide Web was actually born. So there wasn't a lot to go on. So we were really experimenting and trying to question if what we're doing was actually being done right. We think we actually did pretty good. Another website design that I did, that says 98 back then, so that's a long time ago, that's almost 20 years ago, for Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission. And we did a lot of experimentation, a lot of learning about how users were actually interacting with our website. We actually started to work with different design layouts. A lot of these were graphics, GIFs compressed down to the smallest possible size, because even back then people were still on 56 kilobits per second modems, and a lot of them still were on 33.6 kilobits per second modems. Clients still wanted their logos bigger back then, and as you can see in the SA10, those contracts, there was little use of intervals on a lot of the text and the graphics that we used. So it was interesting to see the progression of design as we went from West Oswego through to here. Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, there's more there. More intervals on those icons. And I wore many hats at Dow Digital. I was creative director, I was production manager of a team of about 20 designers and developers. I was also a Mac system administrator because there was no one else that really had the skills at the time. I was consulting for businesses, small businesses, large government agencies, both here and in the Eastern States. Another early design, 99 this time, so we've progressed another year in our design philosophy. Still, when you're doing the design, you're still trying to portray the client's brand as best as possible. So John and Guy at the time had a really great brand style guide, so it was easy to portray what they were trying to get across and how they position themselves in the market, to how they needed to be on the web. So it was really great to be able to work with them and do that even back then. In 2001, I actually saw the writing on the wall for Dow Digital. They had been bought out by an Eastern States company, and everything sort of started to go down. We'd expanded out a little bit too quickly to South Australia, Melbourne and Sydney, and it was starting to go a bit pear-shaped. So I pulled the ripcord and actually went and did contracting for the next 9 or so years. And worked with a company called KT Studio, Knowledge Technology Studio. It was really hard to describe what we did. We were a small group inside of a government agency. Somehow our director managed to get lots of funds to bring lots of really well-paid people to come and work in his team. We were officially an applied research group. The idea was that we were working around object-oriented content systems. The idea back then was a CMS was really just a great big body field that you start typing text in and sort of drag graphics in and all of that sort of stuff. The intent was around object-oriented content was that each piece of content could be categorized and have topics and have different bits of metadata added to them. And then you bring them all together in different contexts depending on what the user was looking at. So as an example, and the content is made up of different parts of content as well. So you have sort of meta objects that represent, so for example, this activity number 3, which is made up of PDFs which have been categorized, and this particular one's been categorized by different topics, different contexts, what phases, what year that person needs to be learning. So it was about actually starting to build these complex structures of content. It was really interesting. And this particular site for Department of Health was for them to provide teachers with activity and resources from K-12, kindergarten to year 12. I did all the things. I was a designer, I did user experience work, I was behind the video camera, I interviewed people, I did video editing at the time as well because we were working with content, so we had to create our own content. It was pretty boring. We're talking interviews with government people, they were beautiful people, but the stuff that they were talking about was only really of interest to other people who were in that industry. And of course, started this thing around being able to do business analysts, looking at business re-engineering, trying to solve problems that businesses have got in the most efficient and elegant way. And we had a big variance in different types of projects. Some community type forum work that we did, lots of prototyping on different ways of representing content. This would have been, I think, around about 2002, 2003% for art scheme, basically about, I think it's 1% of the budget of government works went towards commissioning public artworks. Not many people know that. I think it may still be around today, but essentially a government building gets commissioned, 1% of that budget actually goes towards artworks that get placed inside and outside those buildings. So we were starting to work around how we could represent this content in different ways. One of it was sort of this geospatial way of working where the user could jump around and see different views of, in this specific example, this structure outside of Rockingham Police Station, different ways of interacting. There was no touch screen, but you could click on the buttons and the photos would change. You could then jump into the photo, and then if you wanted, you could then go and find all the wooden-based artworks or all the red artworks and stuff. Really and we also started working with some different navigation. It was really cool. Got a little bit boring. You're working with government agencies, you've got to deal with a lot of bureaucracy. I just got tired of it. So I went out on my own. I was just a web designer and developer, and I did brands for small companies that would normally not have the chance to have someone, at least with my skills at that point, to understand where they are in the market and then try and give them a brand that represents them to that market really, really well. So some of these are small, really, really small companies like a mother and son accounting firm, Australian Rally Championship, Landscape Australia, which is a large commercial landscaping firm. Few things, it was lonely, but I got to spend some time with my growing family, which was really important to me. I used to walk my son to and from school every day, so that was really nice. Started learning more. When you're a one-man shop, you do basically everything. Sales, business consulting, user experience design, coding, you're a system administrator, uploading people's websites to servers, and when they go down, who's the first person they call? It's you. So you've then got to go and troubleshoot and work out where it's actually going wrong. This is one of my first e-commerce websites for Storm UK watches. This was a great project. First time I was using a content management system to develop a really complex website with, I think it was 200 or 300 different products of different types. I was categorizing the content like I was back when I was working at KT Studio, and giving people different ways to actually find those products. It won an award as well, so I was really happy about that. And we learned some more skill sets as well. So I had to learn how to do search engine optimization for clients. That was pretty early on, but it was still in its infancy. Google was starting to ramp up its ability to be able to make or break the business depending on whether or not your content was easily searchable and well semantically coded. E-commerce and security, PCI compliance, that's another bit that you have to learn. Code management, so making sure that you're not just working on a production server, but you've got different versions of your code that you can work in a development environment, push it up to a staging environment where the client can then go and view it, and then finally push it to production when it's ready. And started working with a group called Trails WA, it's a not-for-profit, in doing quite a bit of Google Map work. This website was built with a colleague of mine who did a fair bit of the geometric side of things. I was doing the design, the UX, and just a business consulting on it. And it's grown from, I think we launched with about 90 trails. It's now got over 450 trails in it, and it was built to go higher and higher and higher. The back end side of this looks really similar, but all of the trail operators can actually get in there and update their own trails. So they can submit it, it gets approved, and it gets posted. So it saves trails themselves actually having to update it. And I got to work with a lot of great clients and a huge variation. So I have an e-commerce website. I like cars. Someone in the industry knew me, so they got me to build their wheel website. So this is a Philippines brand called Rotor Wheels. It's a cheap brand, but a lot of people love them, and so we got the chance to build this website. one of the interesting things with this is all of the photos on the website were taken by the client. So we set up, we made a decision, the only way that we're going to get all the decent photos that we need to have on the site is to take them ourselves. So he set up his own black box, put the wheels in there with lighting that sort of varied from photo to photo, but that's cool. And we took them at different angles, and every single wheel that he had in stock photo got them defetched by someone else, and we put them up on the website. Within about 3 or 4 weeks, if you did a search of a rotor, because of all that work we did around SEO and having all the best images, almost all of the first 2 pages of images in Google were all rotor, all of these images, which was really great. And we won some awards. Storm watches, as you saw before, Ed Hardy watches, everyone knows the Ed Hardy brand. Trying to make that brand as it is be sophisticated and not be like that. It was a challenge, but managed to get, I think it was Best Visual Design nationally in the Australian Web Awards that year, and won an award for the Boogie Track Foundation, which again was another large trails-based website connection through Trails WA. But this was great. This was a business re-engineering exercise. All of their memberships, all of their events, all of their merchandise was being done by offline by a group of volunteers inside the office of the building track. And they wanted a way to make that a much better experience both for their users and for those people that were working in there. So there's actually a staff dashboard that sits in behind this. They can manage all their merchandise, they can manage all the bookings in their events, and they can also manage all the content on their website. So I've really freed them up to have those volunteers then work on more important stuff in the organisation rather than managing all the basic stuff. But working for myself was hard. Invoicing, long periods like 3 months between invoicing periods meant that you had to take up smaller jobs to fill the gaps, which then pushed out the time frame for the large job that you were working on. It just became too hard. And Simon Reed, who I think spoke at 70th DPI last year, said he's been trying to get me to come and work with him for brand agency. Finally gave in and said, yes, let's make this work. So ended up moving to the brand agency in 2014, and he asked me to come on as their UX director. So it allowed me to sort of, although I've been doing design and development up until then, it allowed me to really focus on this thing called user experience. Is anyone familiar with the term user experience or UX? A fair few of you. It's many things to many people. A lot of think that people who do user interface design and user experience designers, there is a lot of crossover there. But UX goes a lot deeper into doing research and doing user interviews, looking at a lot of analytics. So you're looking at qualitative research and quantitative research at the same time to understand problems and provide solutions based on that data. Started doing lots of sketching. We've got a couple of examples here. One's PF. Dan will be familiar with that particular site. And we also did a standard drink tool so that users could try and work out on a standard glass how much was one standard drink. And they could fill or whatever the glass up to a certain point and then see if they were right. Generally you were wrong, but anyway. But it was a great tool, and we had to make sure that it was really mobile ready, which is a little bit difficult when your client is desktop based and you're trying to explain to them that 50%, 55 to 60% of your audience is hitting your website from a phone, so you need to make these interfaces really clear. So I actually started the wireframing process and UX process on a mobile device first, and even scanned these in and created a basic prototype and put them through, and then showed that to the clients so that they could get over the line and understand what was going to be done. And I also kind of became, from my web design and my development background, became a bit of a conduit between the development team and the design team, which I think was fairly well needed at the time, because there was misunderstandings, but I was able to sort of have that common language between the two. Wireframing went Wi-Fi. This is a project at CSBP. It was for their client portal. The hard thing about this, which you kind of need for a user experience, is to be able to talk and speak with the users. They didn't want us to speak to their users, their clients. So luckily we had sort of a proxy for their clients, being their customer support team came in, and we were able to talk to them and try and understand what their hardest problems were for their users, to manage their accounts and manage their orders of fertiliser. Another interesting point about this is the workshops that we did was a great eye-opener for the business, because they actually found out that a lot of them didn't know how different parts of their business actually work. So if they didn't know how it worked, how were their users expect to understand some of the processes? So during this process, we actually helped the business out at the same time, which was a really cool project. These are really hi-fi. It needed to understand a lot of data that was coming in, and we did it mobile, tablet, and desktop. So it was quite a successful project. We started doing a fair bit of prototyping back then as well. It's a quick way to show clients and developers what you're actually trying to do to solve the problem. This is a prototype built in an application called AGDA RP, or AGDA Rapid Prototyping. And it was for PF in 2016, sorry, 2015. And this whole prototype was 100% interactive. And there was a mobile version of it as well. So we were able to get the client onto this, play with the website before we actually started doing the official build. And we were doing this prototype in conjunction with the designers, so there wasn't too much of a jump from the prototype to the website when we finally got to that point. And it also allowed us to instruct some of the design work that was happening, even around things like font sizes and button sizes and where widgets should be. And if there's one thing, if you're doing any sort of web design or digital design, never show them on a printed piece of paper. Always show them on a screen, and always show them at the proper distance from the screen that they're going to be in. If they're at the back of the boardroom table and you've got it up on a TV, get them to sit at the front so they're a proper distance, because it's just too small, they won't get the effect or the video. And put it on a phone in front of them and get them to play with the prototype as well. So, yeah, just don't print. It's a vertical plane, not a horizontal one. Except for when you use the phone. We had some success. We managed to get the PF website out, and it was a brilliant website to use. And that wireframing and prototyping really managed to get us over the line in making our clients understand the problems that they were trying to solve and how we were actually going to solve them for us. You'll never believe what happened next. So I've been done a digital agency, I've done contracting, I tried working for myself, I did advertising. Sort of gave away at the beginning. I'm now working at 7 West Media. And I began as a UX lead, but soon moved into a role of product management. So this was the first project that we worked on. Unfortunately, it already started by the time I got to 7 West Media, and it had already started development in a bespoke custom CMS that someone was building offshore, which was kind of, why would you do that when you buy a $300 CMS that's absolutely fantastic and be able to do much more than that. 7 West Travel Club, the intent was a couple of different plays on this one. The West Australian had a lot of travel clients who were no longer happy to just be a print client. They wanted a way to be able to get digital audience coverage as well. So this was one of the reasons why we created a digital space for all of the travel content. This is a membership site. It started out at $99. It's now $49, and you probably by joining, you get about $500 or $600 worth of offers straight off the bat as a gold member. It was hard to. They wanted to have all sorts of different tiers, and it was like, nah, let's just go with one or the other. They're either free or they're not, and it's worked really well. The editorial staff that does all the stories in the West Australia, this is where all their stories go to, and we gave them a bit of a challenge. So before we launched this website, we've got to have some content, and within about 2 or 3 days, they had 120 articles stuck into the website, all categorised under different experiences, different destinations, and again, going back to some of that original work I did around object-oriented content, it's about just creating this stuff so you can bring it together really easy. So, now the product manager. At 7 West Media, we launched the West Australian last year in 2016. It was a 4-month build from first line of code to launch, which when you're working with a newspaper that's been in production for, or a web side of it been in production, probably for about 8 or 9 years, there's lots of articles that you've got to import into it. I think we did about 500,000 articles from the old archive into the new website. It was a fully responsive site. The previous site we were working with prior to that was with Yahoo 7. And one of the reasons why I'm now at 7 West Media is that they saw, with it being handled by someone else, they didn't have control over the product. They couldn't iterate on the product. They couldn't control their own destiny with the product. So a couple of years they came up with 7 West Media WAN 2.0 strategy. Strategy name needs a bit of work, but the idea was that we'd actually build our own digital capability within the West Australian. And now we've got a great team of about 24, 25 people. At the same time, around about the same time, November 2016, 7 West Media actually purchased the Sunday Times and Perth Now. It was bought from News Corp Australia, and we now have on our newsroom floor the West Australian, the Sunday Times, Perth Now, and Channel 7 News, Today Tonight. There's also Sky News tucked away in the corner, but this is a large newsroom. It's a fully operational newsroom, 24 hours a day, and we've probably got about 200 or 300 staff on that newsroom floor working in shifts. Perth Now was an interesting project. We had to migrate off of News Corp's tech stack, which was WordPress based. We thought 500,000. This went to, I think, 670,000 articles that we had to import from multiple different content management systems that had started in 2009 through to where it was, and then try and convert all of that data into the way that we want it, just nice and clean, so we can manipulate it really well. And that launched 2 weeks ago, after about 5 months. An interesting thing, we've now got 2 products on our stack, on our content platform, and what we're doing, the way that we build it is we componentize pretty much everything in the site. So we've got our headlines as a component, we've got our description as a component, we've got our figure as a component, we've got our video player as a component, and they're all the same components used over here. The intent is you theme the components of a particular product that you're pointing it towards. It makes it much easier when we want to iterate on the product or build a brand new product for a new masthead to be easier to theme that component. So that's where we're working at on that. As a product manager, I'm now responsible for driving a product vision. My particular product is content platform over here, so I've probably moved away from front-end product and design to more this sort of conglomeration of different software components that drives the whole back end. What's a product manager? Well, you're responsible for the vision and you're the voice for all your stakeholders, whether that be business stakeholder or the users that you're actually there. So whenever you're having a meeting that doesn't include those people, you're there to actually sort of run the flag and make sure you're looking at everything. It's hard sometimes because part of my stakeholder group is advertisers, and advertisers in news is a must, but I don't like advertising, a lot of people don't advertise, but it's the way that we make our money. So I'm getting better at wanting to put more ads into that product. So I work with a lot of designers, developers, and production engineers. They've developed what we call DevOps. They're responsible for all of our infrastructure on Amazon Web Services. They don't use a whole bunch of control panels to configure services. They actually write code that gets deployed that then generates this new server out in the ether. So it's called development operations. So they actually write code to actually make this happen. This is one of the tools that we had to develop for the West. It's called Gazette, and it was the way for them to be able to curate different parts of the website every minute of the day. They've got a search box on the right-hand side. They can look up topics. They can look up future stories that are in the system but not yet ready to publish. They're embargoed or they're going live at 2 a.m. in the morning. They can find those. They can drag them into the curation, and they can publish that curation. And then a couple of minutes later on the website, various different parts of the website. Here we've got news, sport, business, politics, etc. That then gets updated. And those also then feeds out to sitemap XMLs for Google News to then pick up and get all the news that they need. Again, some of that early SEO work really helped in making sure the front-end website for the West and for Perth now managed to get high in the news ranking. Perth now has just been launched. You expect when you migrate a website that you will actually have quite a bit of a dip, 2 to 3 weeks if you're going from one website to another. The domain name is the same, you're still going to dip because everything, the shape of the content that Google is used to is now completely changed, and you've got to do your best to make sure that it picks up on the history. Press harder on the button, Brendan. Just on the button, there we go. All right. Pretty boring. What's my tool set? I use Sketch for design for the most part. I also use OmniGraffle for wireframing and sort of data flow diagrams. I'm still using pen and paper. I haven't managed to convince 7 West Media to get me some Copics markers yet. They're great. You just be able to do grey lines and stuff like that. This is just a quick scan that I did, I think, 3 days ago for our preview engine. Our content management system is called Newscape. It's a print-based CMS. Okay, so all of the stories that get put into the newspaper are actually put into this fairly rudimentary interface. We want to be able to show them what that article is going to look like before they hit the publish button. So they can actually pick the package up here and they'll get a representation of the story. Technically, it wraps up all the content in the story, sends it over to what we call our preview engine. It converts it into whatever the website front-end product would use, sends it to the website, it renders it, and shoots it back into the window. And what we're trying to do here is we've got this opportunity to get a lot more video content with recommendations. So we're actually looking at enhancing this with putting recommendations of video or link recommendations that they can then drag and put in their stories. Just to make the stories much more richer. We're using Vision App. Quite a few people, I'm assuming, using Vision App for showing clients, getting comments and stuff like that. We do too, love it. And day to day, as a project manager, I write a lot of stories. The story is, as a user, I want to be able to do this so I can do that. It's the essence of the story. So the developer understands the basic problem, and then you set acceptance criteria of what they've actually really developed to solve that problem. And Confluence, which is the sort of the documented part of that Atlassian product. What's next? We get to iterate on our products now that we've got both of them into the stack, make them better, add additional features, do all the things. We're continuing to work with our editorial team to create new tools that will help them be able to tell the news better, make richer experiences for our stories. Right now, it's just one article. We've got galleries. We want to be able to do recipes, reviews, car reviews, music reviews, and all of those sorts of really rich sort of experiences that we can apply for that. And we've started to prepare our platform to be able to do A/B testing. Anyone know what A/B testing is? A few of you, A/B testing. So essentially, you can take any part of your website and do a slightly different version of it, and then through a controlled method, allow a percentage of your audience to actually view that different version of your website, collect analytics on it, so that you can then go, did this work or did that work? Sometimes you can do ABC testing that becomes a little bit more difficult, but essentially you could go, all right, let's change this top navigation bar and we're going to make it bigger. And then we can actually put that out to 10% of the audience and engage whether or not making it bigger made a difference, they were interacting with it more, they can make better with it. So we're setting up A/B testing, and that was really cool for you. I'm going to keep changing hats all the way through that, and thanks very much for listening. There's a kick.